Hi there, today I'm going to be going through how you can route leads from Marketo to your Salesforce instance using the Chili Piper REST API and Marketo webhooks. So if you're not familiar already, Chili Piper is a tool that makes it easy for inbound leads to schedule meetings with your sales team, and then it handles the distribution of these meetings to the members of your team. You can connect Chili Piper to your forms, so it will route the leads automatically for you. However, if you want more control over how leads are routed within Salesforce, you can use the Chili Piper REST API from within Marketo to give you this control. And before jumping in how you can use Marketo webhooks and all of Marketo's automation logic to control your routing in Salesforce, I'm first going to explain a bit about how Chili Piper is set up. Okay, before I begin diving into Chili Piper here, I just want to note that I no longer have access to Chili Piper, so I can't actually dive into the platform to show you this stuff, but I can still walk you through it to give you an idea. So the distribution of inbound leads is handled by the concierge or inbound router, which specifies the rules for how leads are distributed to members of your sales team within queues. And a queue is a method of grouping sales team members, and you specify the routing algorithm within the queue. So you can choose round robin or ownership based, and you can choose other rules that will determine which events will be directed towards this queue. So for example, you can specify that only events for leads with an A quality score can be passed to the A quality score queue. And then you can also adjust the weights of the active assignees. So if you want McLean to receive double the amount of leads that Colin gets from this queue, then you can change McLean's percentage to 200% and leave Colin's percentage at 100% to achieve this. And then following on from the example of having an A quality score queue, you can then set up an inbound router so that any leads passed through this router can be distributed to different queues based on their quality score. So in this example here, we've set up a router with 3 different queues. We've got an A quality score queue, a B quality score queue, and a C quality score queue. So then when a lead comes into this inbound router, the queue they go into is determined by what quality score they have. And then once they're inside this queue, the routing rules that you've established within the queue will determine how they get routed to the active sales members within that queue. So now that we know how Chili Piper is set up, let's see how we can configure our automation logic and our webhooks in Marketo in order to route people using Chili Piper within your Salesforce instance. Okay, so let's take a look at the Chili Piper REST API request that we are going to be making within Marketo webhooks. So we'll see that we are going to be making a post request to this URL, and we are going to be putting in our domain at the very end. And then this is the stuff we need to specify in the post request. There's a lot of stuff we don't need here, so I'll show you what we do actually need, and we'll put this in the Marketo webhook. So let's jump back to the blog post here. And this is what we're going to copy into our webhook in Marketo. So let's head on over to the admin section. I'm going to copy this so long. And we're going to create a new webhook. We're going to call it Chili Piper Routing. And I'm going to paste the body that I just copied over from the blog post in here. And for the description, I always like to copy and paste in the API documentation link here, because it makes it very easy when you're coming back to edit this webhook to just follow this link to go back to the API docs. The URL that we're sending it to is this one, and we need to swap in our domain. So here I am going to put in, let's say, the Workflow Pro, my domain. And then the request type is already set to post. And then we leave request token encoding as none, and we change the response type to JSON, and then we hit create. So once we've found our webhook here, there's one final step we need to do. We need to go into the custom headers and we need to add a new one called content type. And I've made a note of this here in the blog post. We need to set content type equal to application JSON. So I'm going to do that now. Oops, sorry. So it should be content type and then application JSON. And there we have it. That is our Chili Piper routing webhook set up. And I'll explain now how we are going to use the campaign description token from our Marketo Smart Campaigns to specify what router the person will go through in Chili Piper. Okay, so everything I'm going to go through here within Marketo is covered in this blog post, so no need to take notes. You can always come back here. But I'm going to dive into Marketo now to this Chili Piper lead routing program that I set up. And the first thing to notice here is that we've got 3 routing smart campaigns. And in each one, we have put in the name of the Chili Piper router that it corresponds to. So this one corresponds to the catch-all router. This one corresponds to the contact sales router. And this one corresponds to the new portal signup router. And then in our webhook request, we pull in the smart campaign description, which is going to be all of these values to let Chili Piper know which router we want the lead to go through. And the way these smart campaigns are set up is very simple. It's a simple campaign is requested trigger. Then in the flow, we call the Chili Piper lead routing webhook. And then this step is optional. If you want to include everyone who ever passes through any of these routing smart campaigns in the program, then you can just set an applicable status here. This is an operational program for us, so we just set them as a member. And the advantage of using the campaign description token here is that we can use one single webhook, and then we can change the router the person goes through based on the smart campaign using the description. So this saves us from having to need 3 different webhooks to access those 3 different routers. This is a much more efficient way to do it. And then when you actually want to use these routing campaigns, you'll do so in the flow by doing something like this. So say you have an MQL campaign, for example, then in the flow of the MQL campaign, you can do something like, if the MQL source is contact sales, then let's put them through the contact sales router. Or if the MQL source is portal signup, let's put them through the new portal signup router. And then finally, if they don't match any of these above criteria, let's just put them through the fallback or catch-all router. An important thing to note here is that before you call any of these routing campaigns, you need to ensure that the person has synced to Salesforce first. And I make a note of that here. So if you are going to use a sync person to SFTC action, then you'll want to use a wait action to ensure that there's necessary time for the person to sync to Salesforce first before you make all these requests to send the person through the Chili Piper router. Okay, so now let's talk about how we can set up failure alerts for when Chili Piper fails to route a lead. So going to someone's activity log here, we can see this is the webhook request to the Chili Piper lead router. And if we open it up, we can see the response that was returned from Chili Piper here. And going back to the blog post, I will show you what a successful response looks like and what a failed response looks like. So if it's a successful response from Chili Piper, we can see that after the URL, we have a question mark and then the ID of the lead and then route ID. However, if it's a failed lead assignment, after this URL, we can see that the ID is missing and it goes straight to route ID. So that's how we know whether the routing was successful or not, is the presence of this question mark ID equals. So that's how we can set up alerting within Marketo. We can have a webhook is called trigger, and then If the response does not contain the question mark ID equals, then we know the routing for the person failed. And in this case, we can just set up a simple alert email like this, where we include a link to the person and some information if you want, like their MQL source or their MQL source detail. And you can also include notes about what needs to be done now to manually route the person so that your sales team can get in touch with them. So the first step that is involved in manually routing someone is identifying the router name that they were supposed to have gone through. And you can do that from your alert email, where you click the link to go to their Marketo activity log. And then you might just type chili into the search box at the bottom of the activity log. So you might just type in like chili here to find the Chili Piper webhook request. Once you find the webhook request that failed, then go to the payload and then find the router name that the person was meant to go through. So in this case, we know they were meant to go through the catch-all router. And then before you proceed to manually route the lead, make sure you fix the issue that prevented the lead from being routed in the first place. This is most likely because it was a newly created lead who had not yet synced to Salesforce. And then there are two ways that you can route the lead. If you're a bit more tech savvy, you can copy all this text here and you can insert your own domain. You can insert the person's email address and the router that they are meant to go through. You can copy all of this and paste it into your terminal to manually route the person. Or I think the much more user-friendly way to do it is to use Postman. To route a lead within Chili Piper from Postman is quite simple. You select a post request here, then you paste in the URL, you change your domain, then in the body section, choose the raw option and then select JSON from the dropdown, and then just paste in this value here, and you can get this again from the blog post. So if we scroll up here, you can just copy this straight into Postman. And then all you'll need to do is put in the person's email address and the router that you want them to go through. So like if you copied it straight from the blog post, you'd have these values, and then you'd need to manually swap in their email address and the router you want them to go through. And then once that's done, all you have to do is hit send, and the person will be routed within your Salesforce instance using Chili Piper. If it's your first time using Postman, I give a very good walkthrough on how to make your first request within Postman in the Marketo API Quick Start Guide. So have a look at this blog post here if you want to get started using Postman. And that's everything I wanted to cover today when it comes to Chili Piper lead routing within Salesforce by using Marketo webhooks. If this piqued your curiosity and you're interested in learning more about APIs, then you can take a look at how I integrated Dropbox, the Marketo API, the Rebrandly API, and the Airtable API within Zapier. You can take a look at how you can get unique join links for your calendars with the Zoom Marketo integration post. And then finally, you can check out how to integrate Marketo with Segment in this blog post over here. And then I have a range of FAQs that you might be wondering that you can take a look at this section here to get all those FAQs answered, like what happens if Chili Piper routes a lead with an existing owner? How does it handle duplicates? Can it route leads based on custom fields? And does it handle leads and contacts differently? So you can take a look at the answers to all of these questions in the FAQ section. Have a great day.